All right, and a very good morning to you, wherever it is you're tuned in from Kenya, East Africa, and around the world. Welcome to the live broadcast from KICC. We are at the Kenya Meat Expo 2023 conference, or a conglomeration of a lot of meat and livestock players in this industry. We want to understand what's happening in the value chain. I have a panel with me today. We are going to have two panels, but the first one for this hour will be running up until about 11 a.m. or so. We have quite the guests to speak about this. We'll be talking about animal feed and, of course, so much more. Allow me to introduce them. Nicholas Ngahu is the CEO of Lake. He joins us here today. Nicholas is immediately to my left. Up next is Clarissa Duma, who is the head of programs Mifugo Nimali from KCB Foundation. And lastly, we have Dr. Christopher Wanga from SDL. He's in charge of livestock policy and research. We'll be talking about this and so much more. Welcome to the Kenya Meat Expo 2023. My name is Brian Jodotieno. We now start our conversation now. For those of us who are joining us from home or wherever it is you're tuned in, remember to tag at NTV, hashtag Kenya Meat Expo 2023. And we're going to start at no particular order. We'll be talking about feed and fodder sector development, the feedlots, seed stock, and of course the resolutions thereof. I want to start with the lady because I was born a gentleman. Clarice, to somebody who is hearing this for the very first time and understanding the value chain of livestock and meat production, what is the difference between feeds and fodder?
Thank you very much, Brian. Good morning from wherever you're joining in. There is a big difference in terms of feeds and fodder. Fodder basically would relate to, the grass, the lucerne, and what have you, while feeds are what is manufactured, where you bring a combination of ingredients just to feed the animals and basically enhance their production and growth, and basically also alter the quality of meat as well, in a nutshell, and not going too scientifically.
All right. So, Dr. Chris, Dr. Wanga, so if somebody would come in and start perhaps questioning the nutritional value of either, because one is processed, the other one is pure. What value is there in either, the feed or the fodder?
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers. As the earlier speaker has spoken to, fodder is more of the greenage, the naturally occurring grasses, and other sources of animal feeds. But feeds basically would involve the diet of the animal, and it also includes the fodder. What is processed and what is natural will comprise animal feed. In the animal kingdom, we don't call it food. Food is human, feed is related to animals. So whatever you feed the animal will constitute feed. Whatever you feed a human being constitutes food. So that relationship is that basically feed is much more processed and would certainly have many more nutrients balanced to meet the needs of the animal. However, fodder, being naturally occurring, has a very rich variety of minerals and other naturally occurring substances. But we do feed so that we can be able to balance the ratio for the animal.
Nicholas, we are currently in that period where we're witnessing a hike in the prices of this feed, of their livestock feed particularly. How did we get here before we get into the resolutions? How did we get to a point where we're now experiencing, or other farmers are having to deal with high cost of production with regard to animal feed? What occasioned that event to happen?
Thank you, Brian. And good morning, viewers. I believe it started with, in the 60s, we were not having so many droughts. And then we found in the 70s, we started experiencing, maybe one drought. And then in the 80s, they became 3 droughts. In the 90s, we are now having those cyclic droughts. And now you have seen what has happened. Last year, we had a serious drought. This year, we had a serious drought. The droughts are becoming more frequent. And then I believe there was also disinvestment from both the private sector and the government as well. because we are seeing we have so much idle land, the government has so much idle land, but we are not able to tap it. When we talk of 1 million acres in Galana Kulalu, which could be utilized for feeds, for animal feeds, for maize, for fodder and maize for feeds. That's how we ended up there. That's my opinion.
All right. So you're so spot on that one, because we've just witnessed one of the worst droughts in the Horn of Africa in such a long time, and this is caused by, of course, majorly the effects of climate change, and we are witnessing that currently. Farmers, or rather livestock keepers, pastoralists, have been going through a very tough time, and we had even some of them sell at throwaway prices. So Clarice, I'm coming to you with the next one. So with the increase in prices of feeds, how can farmers, how can livestock keepers and pastoralists innovate around that and mitigate this issue? Because again, they have to be in production all year round.
Thank you very much, Brian. Actually, it's a very complex situation, because you see, the other thing that we are facing is that animal feeds are competing with human food, and so naturally, human food will take precedence over animal feeds. So as KCB Foundation, what we are promoting is to try to educate and capacity build farmers on other alternative, cheaper methods of raising animals. One of the things that has contributed to environmental degradation, again, is livestock keeping. So one of the things that we are trying to do, and you mentioned feedlots, is to support farmers to establish feedlots whereby they use a combination of both feeds as well as natural fodder, in terms of feeding the animals. So a semi-intensive sort of kind of production system. In this way, then they can try to save on the feeds that they would have given the animals. It is a pilot that we are starting as a foundation. The jury is still out as to the success. But as a stakeholder in this particular value chain, we are trying to work with our colleagues all around, our partners and other stakeholders and government, just to see how we can mitigate the climate change aspect as well as the high cost of feeds. So yes, we are still in the piloting stage.
Amazing. Dr. Wanga, I'd like you to come in on that conversation. The mitigation measures around the expensive feed for animals. How can farmers who have to keep on being productive all through the year, innovate around feeding their animals, especially at a time when we're experiencing these expensive feeds for animals?
Thank you very much, Brian. As we all know, the cost of animal feeds arises from a number of factors. And for the stakeholder who is a farmer, it is extremely important that when we are raising our animals, let's put the cost element to ourselves. If you look at sources of animal feeds, you have the naturally occurring grass, you may plant, you may also process. So it depends on what you probably want to utilize the animals for, and this should inform the farmer who is the investor in this space in his choice of animal feeds. The climate change has complicated the equation about the naturally occurring feed, and that is one of the areas that we speak to in terms of observing the carrying capacity of our lands. An impression has been created globally that livestock are environmental contaminants. I will tell you, out of 1 out of 100, the contribution of livestock to environmental or greenhouse gas emissions is less than 1%. What normally is attributed to livestock, especially in the temperate areas, is the machinery associated with the keeping, the temperatures and processing. So if you look at a grazing animal, its contribution to environmental degradation is extremely minimal. In terms of prices, the government has, the national government and the county governments have closed ranks to try and mitigate the cost of processed foods. And this has involved waiver of certain taxes in terms of the inputs and incentivization of the farmer in terms of trying to seek better markets. However, the critical point which I want to observe here is feeds are farmer-centered. And it is extremely important that our extension officers are able to work with these farmers and look at the market. What do they intend to do with the animals? And now it will inform the choice of the feeds and therefore the cost of the feeds, so that once we have the end in sight, then it will be very important that our farmers will benefit from advice from our extension officers and therefore choose the feeds that will allow you to have a small return on investment, because the inputs are extremely costly, bearing in mind other variables like electricity and related costs.
Amazing. So we've talked about the production part, which is very important. Now let's have a go-to-market strategy. Nick, as Chemlake, and I'd like you to speak authoritatively on this one, comparing the markets locally and internationally, which ones, how do the markets compare, first of all, before we even go into the conversations about market access? How do the markets locally and internationally compare? Who is procuring more from Kenya? What are the volumes? And how does that compare with the local market?
Well, the local market is quite huge. I mean, we are almost 60 million Kenyans, and, we have to eat. And, back to the conversation on feed and fodder, you realize that ugali is our staple food. And if it's not ugali, it's githeri. And, we are competing with animals to a point where we are willing to demonstrate because of prices of maize. Unfortunately, the animals cannot demonstrate, but they need that maize probably more than we need, because they need to eat it so that we can have meat on the same table with ugali and githeri. So sometimes the conversation is complex. And I was talking to Solomon of Farmer's Choice, and he was telling me that they are doing 50 tons of smokies per day. And I think the recent numbers are pointing to about the meat industry is massive, massive, massive in Kenya. But whatever we consume here is what the market offers, not what is ideal. So you find that a Maasai goat will take 4 years to mature in Kenya, yet in Australia, they are able to achieve that in 9 months because of the same issues we have discussed of feed, fodder, and lack of water. Lack of pastures, basically. Water is the reason we are having all these challenges. And then, when you look at the meat market, our biggest market is UAE, Dubai. I think 60% of our meat exports, they go to Dubai, and they are the biggest consumers of goats. And the reason, Dubai is an interesting market, because first of all, they have the locals are not even significant. The population of locals. Dubai is now about 13 million in population, and the locals are probably 1 million or 2. You find expatriates, from US, from Africa. They consume a lot of, goat meat, and then sheep meat is consumed by the Indians and Pakistanis, who they are neighbors with Dubai. So those are some of the dynamics that make Dubai a big market. Actually, I was in Dubai last month. And from the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, they're now doing $1 billion in meat exports. And Kenya is
that
only...
Is annually?
Yeah?
Annually?
Annually, yes, $1 billion,
great.
Which is about 140 billion from current rates. And we are only doing about 6 to 7% of that market. And then Saudi is also our big market, especially around the Hajj, because they get a lot of, religious tourists, and then there's Bahrain, Oman, and Oman is interesting because we are doing live animal exports to Oman, We've done about 40,000, but the orders are huge, but we are not able to meet them. And then recently, we are also doing Egypt, live animals. And then Kuwait is a small market, but they offer better prices.
So if allow me to stay with you on that same point, if we are doing just 7%, who then are the competitors, or rather the other suppliers that these source markets are actually, these meat markets are actually depending on?
Well, the biggest competitor for Kenya right now for Dubai market is India and Pakistan, because they are just, across the sea.
So the cost of transportation is cheaper and everything?
Yes, the cost of transportation is cheaper, and they're also able to bring in live animals from their markets to Dubai.
Okay.
And then we are also competing with Australia on the international front. Regionally, we are competing with Ethiopia and Sudan. And, with the happenings in Sudan, it means we might need to exploit that market further.
Before I come to Dr. Wanga rather, on how to mitigate that competition, Clarice, are there any challenges we are facing in the international market, and how do we go around them?
Well, I would not be an expert on that, but from a financial point of view, I'll now speak from a financing point of view, we don't see many requests to support the export market. And these are some of the things that we are trying to really bring up our players in the sector, our local players, to take advantage of the fact that there's huge demand out there for our products. However, given the challenges that we are facing, expensive inputs, expensive feeds, the vagaries of climate change, then it also becomes risky, also from a financial point of view, to support some of these initiatives. So what the bank has invested in through the foundation is to try and support local players in terms of building their capacity from an expert point of view, so that then once they're up to the levels and standards that are required, then the bank is able to finance them. And it is because of this that we are partnering with Lake as well as the national government, just to see how we can bring up our local producers to exploit the international market.
Wanga, the next question is basically based off of Clarice's response. How do we compete optimally with other players in that international market? Because $1 billion market, that's huge, and we need to tap into that strongly. If we're only doing 7%, then there are questions we need to ask ourselves. How do we play into that? How do we compete into that market optimally? Wanga.
Thank you very much. I wish to state from the outset that the livestock sector is actually a huge giant sleeping. If you look at the value of leather traded globally, leather alone is almost 5 times the combined value of horticulture, tea. So I will start with the end of the stick. We have our investors in the livestock space. Let's close ranks and we seek and seize these opportunities. If you look at the live animal trade, there is quite a bit you lose in terms of processing. So as we focus on the live animal trade, let us look at the potential of processing within the country, Kenya, and exporting. Because then you have the meat, then you have the other body parts, you have the hides, you have the skins, and then the attendant processed products. This is a model that will really enhance the prices of these products. Now back to the production system that we use. Most of our animals in the space of meat are raised on very organic traditional systems. The ones in the where you have highly commercialized feeds is especially within the dairy industry. So within the meat industry, most of our animals are raised under a very natural environment. And this now brings in the idea of how do we go about it. And the critical point we must address is the issue of the carrying capacity of our farms, the mitigation of the adverse weather. We have to look at what can we do. And in that space, the government, in support of the World Bank, commenced a very critical project called DRIVE, de-risking livestock livelihoods. And the DRIVE project is focusing on the main arid and semi-arid areas where most of these livestock are reared. And the focus is to attract financiers to this space. Livestock is risky, as you have heard. When you have drought for 6 months, you lose the investment. Even if you had them as collateral, then you have a challenge. So one of the critical focus that the State Department of Livestock is working on is to up the skills in ensuring reduction of risk to livestock enterprises, especially in these areas where livestock is grown in large numbers. And this is going to provide a very steady source of animals that we can approach our markets with. Because as Gauss spoke to earlier, the Kenyan population is huge enough to provide sufficient market for our products. But what is the price? So the attractive issue about the export market is that the prices are a lot higher. And therefore, the return on investment for the farmer would be much higher, and the farmer would likely to break even. And that's why we strive to address the challenges of the export market. And in that space, we look at very many factors. We look at disease, because that's a major obstacle to the export market. So effective disease control, this is where you bring in the counties, you bring in each and every player along the value chain, that let's control disease. Let us make sure we have enough feed stored so that our animals don't lose on their body weight. Breeding. You see, you may have all the feeds, but when you have those inferior breeds that grow for 4 years, then it's not beneficial. So in cross reference to the challenges in the sector, we have a major program on upgrading of livestock, especially the small stock, sheep and goats, where the natural selection breeding is going to be combined with artificial insemination so that we have fast maturing breeds to be able to address our needs for the sector.
You mentioned 3 important things. This is just a follow-up comment onto your statement. Number one is that the local market alone can sustain the production. Of course, before we even think about exporting, but definitely we have to also supply to the international market. You've also talked about de-risking, which is very, very important. We haven't as many insurance firms that are de-risking livestock production. And lastly, on the funding, which brings me to Clarice. What are some of the available funding opportunities for livestock farmers?
The funding opportunities are immense. There are various types of funding. One of the things that we try to propagate is contract farming, whereby a farmer has a contract with a buyer. That again also gives some element of de-risking, because we are assured that there's going to be a market at the end of the production. We also try to encourage as much as possible farmers to take livestock insurance in the event of any calamity, such as the droughts that we've had. And now you can see the floods are carrying away livestock. We've seen several reports. They're able to be compensated and not be stranded after the occurrence. Again, we also encourage our farmers to try and adopt modern breeding techniques, just as Dr. has said, relying on the traditional breeds that take too long to mature. Again, from a financing point of view, the longer the money stays out, the higher the risk. So those who adopt modern farming techniques have a better advantage in terms of financing. And again, also exposure. We also try as much as possible to encourage them to get to know what the market wants. So we try to encourage them, don't just produce for the sake of producing. Try to understand what does the market want. Look at from the end, from the demand side, and then we can look at the supply side. So from a financing point of view, there are various aspects that we look at, but those three main ones that I've mentioned are what ideally a financier will look for. What is the market? What technique are you using? What are the breeds? And so on and so forth. Yeah.
Two follow-up questions on that. You mentioned that insurance for livestock farming is really on the rise. Do you have some numbers to give that perspective? And then number two, when you're financing now, what's the security?
Okay, now in terms of the insurance, I may not have those figures. I'll allow Daktari probably to have that figure from a national point of view. Yes. But as a financial house, as KCB, the numbers are rising on a yearly basis as we go out and educate our farmers. Last year, there were about 500, small number compared to the keepers that we have, but it is a step in the right direction, especially since people are beginning to appreciate that insurance is essential, given that we're not able to predict weather patterns anymore. In terms of the security, we are open. We are quite open, and sometimes we even take the livestock themselves as security, provided they're insured. But we also look at other things. We are quite flexible. We have really tried to deviate from the traditional, land, title deed. So we are using a variety and mixture of instruments just to have the farmers take up facilities.
So you're moving away from the legacy instruments of security.
Yes.
I'd like to talk to Nick later on about, just after Dr. Wanga has spoken on this one, on our other partners that have also facilities for farmers, whichever funding method there is. But Dr. Wanga, you seemed to have the data on livestock insurance. Go ahead.
Yeah, livestock insurance is a slowly growing industry. As we speak, we have two lenses when you talk about the livestock insurance. We have the traditional insurance offered by insurance companies. This is the high premium animals, the dairy animals, the pets. People pay premiums specific to the animal. And then we have the index-based livestock insurance that looks at the extensive farming methods where you insure against the risk of drought and floods. Like in the last financial year, we have had about 140,000 tropical livestock units insured. This runs into almost 500,000 animals. Being new, this is one of the approaches the people on extensive rearing of animals are being supported to be able to backstop, and the role of government is to help the insurance companies reduce risk and be able to look at them as potential options in terms of offering insurance products. So the index-based insurance is a product that is growing, and I want to invite each and every insurance firm that is looking at it, that with government support, I think is a venture worth trying. For financial products, without naming names, I think I want to thank our financial institutions. A number have been upbeat, and people now no longer look at the animal in terms of the slaughter value. Quite a number are looking at the animal with its intrinsic value. A dairy animal giving you 30 liters of milk every day For heaven's sake, how do you look at its slaughter value? 30 liters of milk every day, you can ensure that you can give that farmer a loan of 1 million shillings, he'll pay it in less than a year. So those are the kind of products we are looking forward to the financial partners to start embracing as government supports them to ensure that the risk is minimized in terms of failure to repay.
Great. We have about 6 minutes to go. Nick, I'd like you to speak on the other partners' financing opportunities that are there for farmers. I'm talking in terms of grants and the like. What are some of those opportunities that are available?
Well, I believe, without sounding like I'm favoring, KCB, given our partnership, I believe KCB is doing a lot in terms of, feedlots. And also, as a bank, they can guarantee your farming business based on another farming business. Like, if you have a hardware which has revenues, the way they say livestock, she just told us that she's now taking livestock as collateral, but I doubt, you can have goats at the bank counter and, and give them to the cashier. But that's and then the partners who are represented here, USAID, they're doing a lot in the ASAL regions, and there's a lot of interest. Dr. Wanga has spoken about Drive.
Yeah,
Drive is massive, as in there's a high potential to turn around the livestock sector.
I'm going to stay with you. Let's talk about logistics, especially when the producers are going to the market. Where are we as a country in terms of things like refrigeration services, things like halal stamping? What are some of those facilities that are available to the producers, especially those who have ready meat to be consumed in the market? Yes.
Well, for export, we have 8 export slaughterhouses in Kenya, including Kenchik, and I believe majority of them are near Nairobi. We have other international abattoir for counties which are not operational, but there are initiatives to turn them around, and the existing slaughterhouses. Each town in Kenya has a slaughterhouse, so we are looking at over 300, local slaughterhouses.
Dr. Wanga, are we there yet with the facilities, especially those that are available for the farmers who are producing, and with regard to supplying the market? Are we there yet in terms of technological? And this will handle in the second session, but yes, we just wanted to hint on that as well.
We are not there yet because we have not had very, very accurate information to us so that the investors would be able to target the investments, because again, the government infrastructure can only be so much. So this is work in progress, but I think as we avail much more accurate data on livestock resources, this will inform investors on where to put their money.
Do you think it's because we are largely an informal, it's largely an informal sector where there's no maybe records, inventory, and the like?
This is the position, and as government, there's something we are working on. I want to invite all stakeholders to support. We are working on a livestock master plan that is based on very accurate livestock resources data countrywide. So at a button, a producer, an investor, a processor will be able to know if I put my fridge in Turkana, for example, I have 5 million sheep and goats that can be able to sustain that enterprise.
Amazing. Let me come to the banker. Let me come back to the banker. You've painted quite a beautiful picture of what you're doing with the farmer on the ground. But now there is now the point of processing facilities and the like. Do you also have products or financial products precisely for people who want to set up those support sections, whether it's through logistics, clearing and forwarding, halal stamping, refrigeration services? Are there those ones? Are there supports for that kind of production in the value chain?
Thank you very much, Brian. Yes, very much so. Actually, there is more support towards that end. We support the entire value chain, and not only just in terms of giving facilities, we also provide guarantees and trade financing opportunities for those who maybe need to import equipment. We facilitate that, and we also as a financial institution, have our own insurance intermediary that supports in the livestock insurance component, as well as insuring the equipment, buildings, and what have you. So yes, we are a one-stop shop.
Amazing. All right, this is my cue to give each and every one of you at least a minute and a half or so for your parting shots with regard to market access and to the person who is looking at livestock farming, production, sale, export as an opportunity for them. Nick, go first.
Well, I think the opportunities are huge, and livestock, just like money, it's a medium of exchange, it's a store of value, and, it can be used as barter trade for, the cultural one. And given the population growth and urbanization, the more money you make, the more meat you put on your table, the more you move away from grains. If you're making more money, you can afford, more expensive cuts, different types of cuts for different things in the kitchen, for different recipes. So where we are going as a country and where we are going as, as the world, we are going to need a lot of food to feed the population. So there's a lot of opportunity. They say the next billionaires will be from agriculture. It's not a joke, it's real, and I think it's time the private sector, the government, and development partners saw these opportunities and invested in them, because that's where the money is.
Clarice?
Speaking from a money point of view, there is a lot of money to be made in livestock. But again, from a conservative point of view, many people, we tend to be conservative. The reality is that the risks are there. However, there are ways of mitigating these risks. And we believe that once these risks are mitigated, then as the program that I'm running with called Mifugo ni Mali, then you'll realize that at the end of the day, you're able to make a lot of money. One of the things that really led to the rise of that particular program is that we realized that pastoralists were walking around with millions that were at risk. So how then do we get a paradigm shift? So instead of them having to walk around and having them exposed to weather, drought or flood, how do we then commercialize that aspect, which is what we exist to do.
Yeah. Amazing. Mifugo ni mali. All right, Daktari, tufungie tafadhali.
Thank you very much. Mine is to just re-emphasize what my colleagues have spoken to. The future is in the livestock sector, because 80% of this country is arid or semi-arid, and this is the home of livestock. So by investing in livestock, you are supporting the majority Kenyan. And that is why, in the spirit of trying to create more order in the space of the livestock sector, especially in the meat trade, the government has formulated a livestock bill that is headed to Parliament. This livestock bill establishes a livestock products marketing board. This board will help us in making sure the playing field is level and help our investors, be they local or international, in being able to fit in. In terms of access to external markets, one of the biggest barriers is issues to do with food safety, issues to do with animal diseases. Again, in this space, the government has reviewed the veterinary laws to be able to comply with the international requirements for trade in livestock and livestock products. So again, this is space in another 1 or 2 years. Nobody will be able to tell you, whether in Europe or any other country, that your products don't meet standards, because you will have put a very solid policy and legal framework in place to support your trade, whether within the country, the region, or overseas. And as I'd spoken to earlier, for the investors, we want now to work together. The livestock master plan, when completed, hopefully by the end of the year or early next year, you, in the comfort of your space, will know where to put your resources, because you'll be able to know what is in Turkana, what's in Wajir, what's in Nairobi at a press of a button. And what are the investment options that are available in the livestock space. So this is something that we are all looking forward to, so that an orderly sector will make sure that the financiers view us more positively, the insurers view us much more positively, and our livestock farmers make a return on their investment. Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing. Many thanks. Please, our live audience, give them a round of applause for that. Thank you so much. We have been speaking to three professionals here who are supporting the livestock sector. Nick Ngahu from Chemlake, CEO. And we've also been speaking to Clarissa Duma, who is the head of programs at KCB, Mifugo ni Mali. And she said the next billionaires are going to come from that. That statement had also been reiterated by Nicholas Ngahu. And of course, Dr. Chris Wanga, who is from SDL. Many thanks once again, ladies, gentlemen, for this. And we'll be back with another conversation on the same and exploring how technology and innovation can also be employed in this very crucial market. So don't go too far. If you have time, please pass by at KICC. Continue the conversation on social media. Hashtag Kenya Meat Expo 2023. We'll be back in a short while. Don't touch that dial.
Join me, Brent Leo Smith, and my expert team of guides and cameramen as we explore the wonderful wilderness of Africa. These expert guides and cameramen strive to bring the wildness and magic of Africa into your living room. Come join me for Safari on Pridelands.
Looking for learning material that is tailored to your needs? Look no further than the New High Schooler magazine. As the ultimate guide for junior, secondary, and high school students, the New High Schooler magazine is packed with premium content on a wide range of topics, including careers, literature, finance, and much more. With this magazine, you'll have access to valuable information that can help you make informed decisions about your future. So why wait? Subscribe to the New High Schooler today.
I came in, she pulled out the gun and said if she can't have me, nobody can. What do I do?
It's your fault that my marriage is falling apart.
Diana.
Get out of here! Get out of here now! Get out!
What this woman needs from you is simply your attention. Give her that, and you'll see she'll stop acting so stupid.
Andres? Don't tell me the cab stand I called sent you to pick me up.
Quite a coincidence. Natalia.
Head over heels.
Santon, a fun new world of flavor. Fruity freshness in every sip.
With Molfix pants, changing diapers is now very easy. I tear and take off the used Molfix pants and pull the new one up in a moment. Wrap up the used diaper and throw it away. Come on, mothers, try Molfix baby pants and be part of our happiness movement.
In the 19 years since Arsenal's most recent Premier League title, it has finished in the top 4 12 times, twice as runner-up. Which appears to be where the Gunners are heading this season, with Manchester City ready to seize the championship. But after 6 straight seasons of finishing no higher than 5th, Arsenal has made progress this campaign, even if the wait for another title is about to continue.
The
that moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
The next episode of Daring Abroad comes to you right from Atlanta City in the US, where Kenya's largest diaspora circle was founded 11 years ago.
We have contributed immensely to Kenya.
Now, the circle has just held its 9th AGM in this city.
It is a big circle doing well, but it still has a very big potential.
Find out how members are using the circle to invest here and back home.
I have taken my first loan with the circle. I'm going to buy a property in Nanyuki.
We will also tell you about 3 members who have come together to invest in a rare side hustle on the outskirts of Atlanta City. Kenya USA Diaspora Circle this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on NTV.
A fun new world of flavor. Fruity freshness in every sip.
In your paper this week, the unwanted general in Congo mission. Kenya's Major General Jeff Nyaga exited as commander of regional force in DRC, a scared man. He indicated he has been intimidated, threatened, and called names. Kenya church deaths expose deep-rooted cults in East Africa. Plus our opinion leaders. Comedy speaks truth to leadership. So bring out the clowns. LC Eakuze, Uganda's angry phone holder, is moving state agents to action. Joachim Buembo, Magazine. Home, away from home. Finding peace and calm in Kinshasa. For these and more stories, get your copy of The East African.
This is NTV.
All right, welcome back to our broadcast, coming to you live from KICC at the Kenya Meat Expo 2023. My name is Brian Jojotieno. We are in our second and last part for the mid-morning sessions. We'll be talking about production, innovation, and of course the whole process of value addition in this session that is clearly power-packed. And my guests are here with me today. My panelists are here. I'm going to introduce each and every one of them one by one. Again, forgive us, the gender question is not balancing. So I'll go with the lady first. With us, we have Ms. Wambui Bariri, the CEO of Retrack. Yeah, there you have her. And then next is the Senior Manager Livestock Program at Gatsby, Dr. John Wamahio. Yes, on the far end. And then Ernest Njoroge, Dr. Ernest Njoroge, Resilience Team Leader from USAID, is also here with us. And last but not least, John Long, President of Jarvis. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, good to see all of you on the panel today. We want to talk about production, innovation, and emerging solutions for the meat sector. And we just want to trace the evolution. I'm going to go with Ms. Wambui first. How has meat production evolved, especially from a value addition perspective, the production process, the technology thereof, and finally in the output, and how that is having an impact in the market? What's the evolution look like?
Thank you very much. I think I would start by maybe setting up a supermarket situation, because traditionally meat was sold only in informal or semi-formal setups. So through evolution of the sector, meat then came into the supermarket. I think we've been doing meat for about 10 years. Now coming into the formal sector, and we do have also outside the supermarket sector, formal butcheries. We've had Prime Cuts out there for a while. We've had Happy Butchery out there for a while. But once it came into the supermarket, it got an even more formal setup that allows the beginning of appreciating meat in different aspects, specifically the issue of cuts, because in the informal sector, meat is, for most people, just meat.
Yeah. And also the packaging, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. In the informal sector, it's just meat.
Just open.
Cut for me here.
Yes.
You know, you don't specifically. We have traditionally not made a decision to cook, then buy meat. We actually buy meat, then make a decision to cook. Which, if you understand meat, that should not be. So as we got into the formal sector, you realize we start having skill that allows you to engage in terms of, I want to go and boil, what cut should I buy? I want to go and grill, what cut should I buy? I want to go and roast, what cut should I buy? So the innovations coming out of that, including the packing. And I think we also had a transition period post the paper bag ban. It brought in a new discussion of packaging for meat. I see places where people carry their own containers. I see there's been a struggle in the informal sector as to what paper to use. I'm never sure where that paper is coming from. In the supermarket, constant conversation with NEMA that allowed the understanding that you do require plastic for packing meat and for preserving. So that allowed us to continue packaging it in sealed, similar to what we've seen in the expo that NEMA is doing, that KMC is doing. So the innovation has been gradual, growing, increasing the value of the sector. And the beauty of our economy is we see that more often than not, the informal sector picks up what is happening in the formal. So you start to see what was traditionally an informal butchery start to have better display, better differentiation of the cuts, increasing not only the value for the consumer, but even for the retail outlet owner.
And even the preservation is now better. We are seeing refrigerators and all that. And
let me just cut you short.
Please.
Of interest is very slowly the understanding that cold storage is the way, that's what increases value for meat. We've seen the average Kenyan wants red dripping meat.
Yeah.
I take this opportunity, like we did with yourself, to educate guys that good quality meat is that meat that has been at a minimum 8 hours since slaughter.
Yeah.
Not that which you slaughter now and you put on the end. We say culturally we slaughter in the morning and then
we eat in the afternoon.
Yeah, but
and that's collagen, right?
Yeah,
that's the name.
You're eating muscle, not meat.
Yeah, you're eating muscle.
And traditionally, even though that's what we tend to claim, I think they probably roasted at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And then cooked that meat 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning. So it has done its 8 hours, not our now what we call quote unquote traditional, where we slaughter it at 9 and it's on the fire in 2 hours time. So just adopting cold storage and realizing that curing of meat for a minimum of 8 hours does the trick for good meat. We learned that there's actually nothing called hard meat. Hard meat is purely because you didn't let it do the 8 hours or you're cooking it in the wrong way, etc.
But okay, we'll come back to that conversation later on. And also in the conversation around conversation around meat packaging, the media is a big player. If you know, you know. Dr. Omahi, I want to come to you on this one. Traditionally, the high level of preservation, packaging, value addition was the government's job, Kenya Meat Commission, for the longest. And they opened outlets and go-downs in towns, various towns in Kenya. There's one in Eldoret, which, of course, there's a process of reviving it and all that. What was the impact of opening that space up to the private sector?
Thank you very much. I think the meat retail business is very profitable. Yeah. By the way, it's the only business that you make between 40 and 50% margin. And therefore, this gave the private sector to have a share of the pie, and they have really enjoyed. Maybe the tragedy is that the way that was released to the private sector was not really under the guidance. If you compare this to other sectors, for example, dairy has been really had held by the government and the government agencies, and compare that with meat that, as we're saying, as Umbe is saying, meat is meat, and we buy meat. And I will throw this back to you, that when you buy meat as meat, nataka nyama, you end up buying, most of us buy meat that's 40% bone, which we ordinarily don't eat. Maybe if you're doing stew for soup, but 60% flesh or muscle. And that's, so you end up paying so much for so little. And I think this probably is a good call that we could redirect, and gatherings like this is one step in the right direction.
Amazing. So let me come to Dr. John Long, Mr. John Long, the president of Jarvis. What are some of the production innovations that are promoted Kenya to increase the meat production to where we are seeing it currently, whether it's applying for the local market or international?
Well, that's what we do. We've identified the African market now as the next key market for the world.
Yeah.
But there's an educational process. We have the technology, we have all of the rules and regulations for everybody to meet international standards. And that's our key purpose. We want food safety, food security, not just the technology to improve production, but this market, your market, is going to explode in the next few years. Nairobi's office is 1 year old, but we will soon have several other offices across Africa, because your whole market, the African market, is going to explode. You will never be able to produce enough protein for you or the world. So we've got a long process ahead of us, but we're here to educate and provide any of the technology that you need for any aspect of the slaughtering, livestock, animal protein, everything. So, you know, we're going to open up more offices across Africa, because this is going to be an unbelievable market.
Dr. Njoroge, I'd like you to come in on the same. What are some of those production innovations that are currently being employed for the Kenyan producers to be able to access our market and, of course, increase production volumes?
Thank you so much. I think some of the innovations that really help the producers include the IT and connectivity, and the presence of phones everywhere in Kenya. Kenya is currently leading the region when it comes to connectivity, where producers can actually communicate with buyers through online platforms, through they can receive payments through M-Pesa. I think that is, in my opinion, a very, very good move. And if connectivity can go through the entire country, where a producer in Moyale, a producer in Garissa can actually connect with the market, wherever they are, and they can receive payments, and then animals can be delivered. That, in my opinion, is quite critical. The other issue I want to add is, you see, when you walk alone, you can walk fast, but you won't walk far.
Yeah.
But if you walk when you are many of you, you'll go very far. So it is really, really critical for us to see how we reorganize our producers, or how they reorganize themselves, either in form of associations, in form of cooperatives, because there is strength in numbers, such that the buyers or the people within the market space are able to access many producers at the same time. That, in my opinion, is quite critical, so that it's not individual producer who is somewhere in Loyangalani who is struggling how to sell his livestock. It is maybe an association that is, or a producer cooperative that is in Marsabit, that is helping many of these producers to come together, and then marketing becomes much easier. Thank you so much.
Amazing. I want to come to Ms. Mbarire, and let's not talk about the market. Ms. Mbarire, we are coming from a very tough time We've had COVID, we've had pests, we've had the global shocks in supply chain. Of course, the issue about expensive animal feed. How have producers, and especially supplying to the people you represent as retailers, how have they felt the impact of all these issues, including inflation, which then impacted the cost of living that we are currently going through? With these so many global shocks and the effects of climate change, pests and diseases and all that, what has been the survival mechanism of this? And would like you to start from an impact perspective. How have all of these issues affected the market?
I guess this is a good forum to have this conversation with, because our disruption didn't start with COVID, especially in the meat sector. Our disruption started with the famous red alert. That's why I say this is the right forum. It's the right
that was
station.
Done by NTV.
It's the right station.
Okay.
So one of the things we see, both in regard to meat and fresh food, is that a lot of consumers are still growing to the idea of buying fresh food in store, be it meat, be it vegetables, be it fruits. So the meat industry in store has kind of been recovering slowly because of two things. One, I think knowledge about meat is growing, as I said earlier. So you start wanting to buy from where you understand there might be some element of traceability. So because it's a formal sector, the reality is the retailer knows who they're buying from and takes time to understand where are they sourcing from. You have a secured supplier who has secured a constant market. So they go out of their way to sustain that supply into the stores, which means in spite of the challenges of the drought, there has been a constant flow of meat into the stores. So it hasn't gotten very disrupted. The disruption has been price-based because even the sourcing becomes more difficult because you're giving specific markers of the quality of meat you want into the store. So it has steadily climbed from red alert, took a dip obviously during COVID like everything else did. And the dip, I think, with red alert was probably larger than with COVID.
Do you have the stats?
Let me not quote. There would be individual figures. But that has been constant and we've seen it grow post-COVID. The beauty of the discerning, quote-unquote, middle-income Kenyan that we talk about a lot is that they're also looking for the convenience of a one-stop shop, which, again, works in the favor of the retail outlets, especially those that have both fresh food, meat, FMCG provided together. So it's been a steady grow. It's been a steady grow through. It's interesting to note that even with the online presence that has happened, we see meat being bought online, which would not have imagined. We are moving away from that. I must see, I must feel before I buy, especially for consumption, not for food consumption, not furniture and clothes. But I would say it's been stable. It's been stable. There's a slow, continuous growth in it.
Amazing. Dr. Njoroge, I'd like you to speak on the same, the effect of the global shocks on the livestock and meat market.
Thank you so much. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have faced in the last few years is multiple shocks, including the red alert that she mentioned, where it depressed the market, COVID-19 that locked the entire country. We have had very, very severe drought in the last, with 5 failed rain seasons. And with this drought, we lost about 2.5 million animals
which is equivalent to about 2 billion Kenya shillings. And this loss is actually coming from producers. It is the producers that are losing everything. So it's making them poorer and making the country even more poorer. In some of the areas of this country, we also faced Rift Valley fever outbreak in places like Isiolo, in parts of Garissa, and this is a major shock. In addition to that, we have been faced with very high levels of inflation caused by Ukraine crisis and other international shocks. So it is really, we must commend ourselves because we are still standing. The country is still standing. Pastries and livestock producers and business people are still standing. We have done, in my opinion, very well compared to these types of shocks. The biggest, the challenge we have with shocks, it's like if you have your money in the bank, and then every 2 to 3 years, there is fire that comes and burns down the bank. Now, how you survive after that is a challenge. So, all of us need to pull together to see how we cushion the producers, we cushion the small-scale businesses, we cushion the medium and even large-scale businesses because all of them are affected. And it is nobody's fault. It is a natural phenomenon. So we have faced a lot of shocks. And the worst of it all is that it has affected most the poorest of the poor, the highly vulnerable community households in this country. But if we come together, we can make Kenya a much better place. Every part of this country can be a very, very good place to live in so that we are able to cushion these shocks. We are able to create wealth. You see, the reason why many livestock producers are poor, it's not their own fault. They put a lot of effort. They put all the effort that they can. But the shocks that come really erode. It erodes the wealth that they have created. You raise livestock for 1-2 years, and then when the drought comes, it wipes everything. And then, in addition to that, when these rains came, we were faced with the floods in some parts of this country. Some parts of Moyale, a number of owners, livestock owners, their livestock was wiped out completely. We also have challenges of diseases that come when rains come. So all these are quite major shocks that affect the sector. But I believe if we stand together, we can address them, and the country will be much, much better. We'll be able to create wealth through the livestock sector. Thank you.
Dr. Omahi, I'd like you to now speak on how the businesses have survived those shocks, global and local alike. What was the resilience plan?
I think one of the things that have happened is that businesses have emerged stronger, and especially on the feed and fodder. Okay. We have seen pastoral producers moving their livestock from as far as Elwak to as low as Taita Taveta by tracking. Traditionally,
and that's very important, especially for now that we're in the era of climate change and all that, and how it's affecting the feedlots and all.
Yes. So traditionally, producers would trek the animals. You can imagine covering 1,200 kilometers. And so as a result of their resilience, they've been able to track, 1, 2, going to areas with more pasture. Number 2 is that we have also seen feed manufacturers really coming together to lobby for either yellow maize or reduction in taxes. And that has at some point yielded. Number 3, how businesses have been able is to purely get into alternative feeding and finishing regimes. We have seen emergence of feedlots. We have seen also emergence of pork production that is quite off from the traditional pork production. Poultry has been also a major challenge. We've seen the improvement in genetics. A bird that used to go for 42, now we have a bird that converts it to meat in 30 days. I think also in the meat space, we have also seen businesses being creative, adapting to the changing environment, where in the past, businesses would offer meat on bone, and now we're seeing deboning, differentiation of meat products, traditionally, you didn't get minced meat in a local butchery. Today, that is happening. We are getting bone meat. Every butcher today has a bone saw, innovative, that can now cut that bone to the size that the consumer cannot complain about. In the past, we used to use axes and pangas, very crude ways, but we have seen over time this changing.
Does that have an effect on production, by the way? the use of crude methods like the panga and all that, does that have an effect on the production quality?
Yes, of course, course. Because, for example, I don't know if you know of a specific cut known as T-bone.
Yeah.
T-bone comes from the back.
Yeah.
And so when you're splitting the back, what we call the spinal, using an axe, the bone shatters. And so if you use the modern technology, we're using a saw, the cut is so smooth and presentable. Whereas consumer preferences have become sophisticated. We go to a hotel and ask for T-bone. We go for ribeye.
Yeah.
But the business, if you used a crude weapon, cannot get that.
You can't get that. I'd like to ask John Long 2 questions, especially from your point, which is basically a follow-up question. Do you think globalization is the one that's pushing this kind of professionalism in meat processing? Because you go to high-end hotels, 5-star, 4-star hotels, there are meat, even in the menu itself, you see T-bone, you see very, very specific cuts and all that. Do you think globalization is the one that's pushing that standard practice, especially with regard to production? And then the next question will be about how to innovate around the challenges that we are facing currently in production. But yes, talk to us about that.
Absolutely, globalization is pushing the market. You know, I have customers, I've spent the last 20 years in China, and I have customers begging me for protein from any country, wherever I can find it. That's why I said earlier, you will never be able to fulfill the demands for protein here or any other market. And you had an interesting comment about websites. In China, there are 50,000 websites where you can buy meat online. 50,000 websites that you can buy meat online. That's how that market has developed.
I hope the tech bros are listening.
It's a huge, huge program. And all the different kinds of meats that you can buy online can be processed so that the shelf life is longer and there's no damage to the product. It's safe and secure. So, so many opportunities. So we're here, we've identified the African market as the next great market. And the opportunities, there's challenges. Certainly the market prices are usually the problem. But there's ways to overcome them, and we can bring the technology necessary. Livestock is a good example. You can't make the meat if you don't have the livestock. So we have livestock professionals able to come here, people that can go to the States from here. We have great training programs to increase the production of livestock in a safe manner. You know, food safety isn't just for people.
Yeah.
Food safety is for the animals as well. You have to grow food for the animals or feed the animals with safe, secure food.
Okay. Amazing. I'm still staying with you. And any private sector innovations to strengthen resilience against these shocks or unforeseen challenges that may dog the industry? And by the way, this is an open blank check to all the panelists, but I'm going to start with John Long.
But I'm sorry, say that again.
So the innovations in the private sector that are currently countering and any of these shocks that the producers are facing.
Well, there is. These are the challenges we're speaking of. But we've talked to several individuals here that are willing to take on the risks and in all aspects, live animals production, meat production, to get this thing going. They see the market potential of their own products. And, you know, certainly we have challenges, but we have ways to deal with those challenges. Feeding animals, for instance, in confinement centers. You don't have any more pasture land, so everything's going to be confinement feeding now. But we know how to do that. We can show you that, And we have programs to teach people here, or and people that can come to Kenya to teach here.
Ms. Barire, most of the people you represent are private retailers. How are they innovating around these challenges? Because we're also seeing some of them taking action and doing their own packaging in other industries. I've seen sugar that is packaged by specific retailers, seeing processed food, grains and all that. Are they considering meat as an option? I don't know. Sorry for that. Okay, technical team, we're going to fix that.
Meat, okay, it's back.
Okay,
so meat has been an option. The thing about retail, whether formal or informal, is that you can never go wrong with food. Yeah. The demand for food is a constant demand. Remember yesterday we have a shortage of 300,000 tons that we need to find even within our own local market. So yes, definitely looking for ways to fill that gap. And one of the things I see around that innovation is, if you look at, I think what Dr. Wamahio has said here is, there's a greater demand for sustainably managing the meat you have. So if I'm selling meat and I'm using an axe, I lose part of that meat because as the bone splitters, it goes on to meat, and when I'm buying as a consumer, I don't know, I can see the splinters of bone, so I say I don't want that. Mm-hmm. If you're not cutting it properly, it's how you end up with some pieces having more fat than other parts, meaning your waste at the end of the day, quote unquote, in terms of bone put aside or fat put aside, is that much more. So your losses are therefore increasing. So investing in technology, especially cutting technology, one, and two, weighing technology, even in your most basic informal butchery, you realize I have not personally seen, even in the village, a butcher weighing meat with the scale that used to have those weights. Yeah, they've moved it a step further so that you're getting better measurement, not losing any meat, and obviously not taking any out of your consumer.
And accurate pricing, by the way.
Yes, which also helps in that accurate pricing. Packaging, obviously. Post the ban, there was a struggle because I don't want to bear the cost as the retailer. The consumer is thinking, I'm buying the meat from you, what do you mean? That you now want to sell me the paper. So finding convenient packaging for that meat. Pre-packing, as you spoke. Pre-packing is an age-old tradition in retail.
Yeah.
Known in Kenya as blue label, but it's really not blue label, it's own brand labeling. And that own brand labeling is done regardless of where you are in the world. Tesco has its own. We saw when the South Africans were here, they had a lot of own brand. And own brand is supposed to benefit the consumer. It's supposed to sustain an affordable price for the consumer because it's always cheaper than the branded one. If I take, say, crisps from Crackles and take crisps from supermarket X that I just branded that, it will be a price lower. Quality is the same, and that's a conversation that we really need to have. The quality needs to be the same. Round meat, what we need, I think, is a bit more learning, a bit more knowledge, capacity building the consumer to understand, because I'll use an easy example from yesterday when we were going around with the ministry officials, and they bought meat from one and didn't buy meat from the other. And the conversation at the counter was purely about looks. Aged meat will not be as red as meat of today. But that is knowledge we need to impact on the consumer, so that the consumer knows that, yes, it's a dull red, but that doesn't mean it's any worse. It actually means it's a bit aged and probably better than the extremely red one. Yeah, so just building the knowledge that we are giving to consumers will grow the industry so much faster.
Amazing. Dr. Njoroge, as a development and support partner for producers, how do you support the producers, the farmers, the traders to mitigate all of these challenges that they're seeing in the meat supply markets?
Thank you. We have provided significant support in partnership with the government of Kenya, the Ministry of Livestock, the county governments, and as well as the private sector, the chambers of commerce. One, to strengthen the local institutions that are already there. Areas that do not have cooperatives or associations, we support formation of those cooperatives because local institutions that are working help the producers quite significantly in marketing their produce and also in access to services. We have also supported access to finance in partnership with various other partners like Agricultural Finance Corporation. We really support markets to work. Any effort that goes to supporting the private sector to play their role and markets so that producers have access where they can sell their livestock quickly goes a long way in protecting the producers. So we have put a lot of effort in partnership with the various partners that I've mentioned to ensure that markets survive the shocks and producers are able to sell and earn income from their livestock instead of losing all their livestock when there's significant shock. One aspect that I would want to mention that is really critical is, when it comes to technology is automation of services, where we are able to reduce the costs of running of businesses, small-scale businesses, large-scale businesses, the producers, the cost of producers themselves. That plays a very, very critical role, and we are supporting that as well. Automation of services, where a farmer or a producer who needs services will just need to tap their phones and access services that they need. That is quite critical. And also, one characteristic that we noted, particularly when there is drought, and drought comes every 3 to 5 years, is that markets in rural areas where livestock is produced in large numbers, they tend to collapse. So, diversifying the businesses plays a very, very critical role in supporting these markets to survive. Instead of a market being a single commodity market, say it's only a livestock market, can it be a form of a supermarket where the producer will get everything that they need? They will also be able to sell their livestock quickly so that the processor and the middle business person is able to access quite easily the products. And also, we try our level best to reduce the time that livestock stays in producing areas, so that there's a high turnover of livestock. The more livestock stays in producing areas because it has not been bought, the more vulnerable these households are because of the various shocks that we mentioned earlier. So if we can make the system quite efficient in a way that within 2 years you know that your bull that you are producing, you'll be able to sell it. We set up various mechanisms, feedlots, the different aspects that can help high turnover and of producers, and the businesses that are involved in meat sector are able to sell their products as quickly as possible for them to make profit. I think that would be quite nice. Thank you.
And Ms. Pereira will tell you that for an animal to stay so long in the production area, it also lowers the quality of meat, right? 30 seconds for that before we go to Mr. Omo here.
The older it is, the harder it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so the younger the animal, the more tender the meat. Great. Dr. Omo here. At a personal level now, how do you advise a producer, whether it's a farmer or a processor, packaging, how do they mitigate against this resilience? Are there new ways, perhaps through R&D, research and development, that you're citing, perhaps best practice in other markets, other production markets, benchmark practices that you're seeing, and you could advise a producer or a viewer who is watching now, or even one in the audience, on how they can self-mitigate and be resilient in a market that is constantly dynamic, dogged by shocks every other day, unpredictable market practices. How do you advise them?
Thank you very much. I think one of the key areas to really focus on, and where we lose as a country, is in production. Our productivity is quite low and inefficient, and in this case, in the pastoral production areas, we only sell when we need money, which that means that we can hold on to our bull because it is nice to have it for longer, but what we really advise is to sell when it is the right time to sell. The second bit of it around productivity is we know we will get into drought every 2 years. Yeah. And animals ought to give birth during the time of plenty. And so what we also advise is synchronization. Traditionally, goats would behave that. They would get on heat at a time to synchronize with the time of birth, that when the young ones are born, there will be a lot of grass. Today, because of migrating with animals, our cattle cannot do that. There is a technology, modern technology around synchronization, and that enables you to time production to times of plenty. Now we are at the time of rains. In another 2-3 weeks, there will be a lot of grass. Most producers in the northern part of this country bought hay at close to $4 a bale, which is about 6, 7, 10 kilos. What are we going to do with hay, with fodder now? There's so much grass. And in 9 months, we'll have very little. At the business level, meat processing level, we have seen introduction of refrigerated vans. Yeah. Advancement in technology, where butchers used to buy what I will finish today, tomorrow I will be in the market. That creates short of that resilience. And now we have seen investments in cold chain, acceptance by consumers, that if when you buy meat, you don't want to buy from a cold chain facility, but when you take meat home, you put it in a fridge. And so what's the difference? And so therefore, the more we get as more efficient from production to consumption, the better for this country.
Amazing. I'd like to switch up a little bit. Instead of having parting shots, I'd like to give an opportunity to anyone who has a question. Anyone who has a question towards our panelists. Okay, I guess there are no questions. Anyone? Before I don't want to lock anyone out. Okay, seems like you're all content. Thank you so much for the comments. Clearly, they're really, really much informed. Let's have parting shots. 1 minute each. Your parting shot to this conversation and to the audience and to those who are viewing from home. The meat market is a huge market. Of course, there are going to be challenges like in any other business. How do you mitigate and how do you stand tall as a champion in the industry to sustain the market all year round? Please, a blank check. Feel free to write whatever you want. Parting shots. Go ahead.
You go. Know your meat. Know your meat. I think as a country, we need to invest a lot in consumer awareness. As a retail sector, we've done quite some work towards this, and we started doing in-store cooking so that you learn about how to cook your meat, you learn about how to store your meat. Dr. Wamahio makes a very good comment of, we insist on not buying meat that has been put in the fridge overnight, yet we buy it and we go and put it in the fridge, so same difference. Understand that because it is dripping red, it doesn't mean it is freshest. Actually, and doctors here in that sector can actually affirm this, that the meat that is not bright red is not necessarily the best meat. And it's not probably the meat you want to buy. You are looking to buy meat that has done at least 8 hours before you buy it, meaning it has gone through Daktari, what is the word? Conversion. Rigor mortis, yes.
Yeah.
That it has converted from being muscle to meat, and that takes an average of 8 hours. So even when you're doing your traditional family activities, slaughter at 3 a.m. so that you roast it at past 10, 11 in the morning so that you actually have meat. Again, learn to think about, and this is mainly to women, because we keep saying women are the greatest buyers, although men do buy meat for the household in some cases.
Yeah.
So where you're buying meat, it's good to, if it's a male buying meat, sorry for calling you a male, if it is a man buying meat, do understand what your wife cooks. Does she boil? Does she stew? Does she roast? So that when you're buying meat that is relevant to the cooking method. If it's the woman of the house buying meat, understand your meats as well, so that you're buying meat for cooking, for stewing, for roasting, for boiling. Understand mincemeat, lean and fat, but usually they look the same, so that we actually start enjoying the meat. And let's not focus only on the red meat. I think we have made this a meat expo, and it's not about red meat only. There's also white meat. We have a few fish exhibitors as well. Let's spread the meat we are consuming. Each has its benefits to us. And I'm sure my minute is over.
Amazing. You've actually spoken on behalf of all of them. I'm afraid I'll have to cut you short. Sorry, we have production timelines, which of course we have to adhere to. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. John Long from Jarvis, Ms. Mbarire from Retrack, Dr. Njoroge from the USAID as a support and development partner, and of course, Dr. Amo here from Gatsby. Thank you so much. We've been having conversation on innovation and resilience against the shocks that we are having in the industry, and how you can stay profitable all through the year, from production to supply, and of course to your business practice as far as meat is concerned. This is the Kenya Meat Expo happening right here at KICC by NTV. Please do join us. Come understand your meat, and of course come and meet and greet. The hashtag is meet and greet on Twitter. Do keep having the conversation. My name is Brian Giorgiottino, signing out for now.